All right, so then I'll just get going here. Welcome everybody who's on the call today, and I know we have a lot of Santa Monica New Tech people joining, or at least RSVPing and not joining, which is not expected. But for those who don't know, Santa Monica New Tech is the group where I actually met Dominique, and Santa Monica New Tech is another meetup group where entrepreneurs and founders and developers, people interested in technology, come together every week on Sunday to network. But what we're going to do today is just focus on what it means to write a business plan, and there's a particular tool that I would like to introduce to the group, which is the business model canvas, essentially a business plan on a single piece of paper, which is quite appropriate if you're a founder, if you're an entrepreneur, and you don't have the time to invest in a traditional 20, 40, 60, 80-page business plan. So we'll go through the purpose of creating a business model canvas. What is it? What is it used for? Then briefly going to talk about how people usually get started on this. And once we're done with the theory, we'll jump into a real life example. As a matter of fact, for that real life example, I'm going to use Dominique's Starshine mobile app, which she is currently in the process of developing. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. A little bit of background, I suppose, would be in order. Um, I have this crazy German name, so I usually go by the initials JT, which makes things much easier. But as far as a professional background is concerned, I went to business school at USC, and then I joined Ernst Young, the management consulting firm, in their strategic advisory services practice, writing business plans and financial models and uh, go-to-market strategies for mid-size as well as Fortune 500 companies. After leaving Ernst Young, I started my own practice here in Santa Monica, where I'm focusing mostly on startups and helping them get off the ground, get their business model in order, attract funding, that sort of thing. Oh, and if anybody wants to connect with me, the best way would be probably on LinkedIn, or you could shoot me an email at my email address on this page. All right. So before we get into the business model canvas, just a quick recap of what's a business plan and why is it important. Especially for Santa Monica New Tech, as I said earlier, we have a lot of founders. And several of them come to me and say, hey, JT, I have this fantastic idea for business. Do you think I need to have a business plan? And I usually tell people, look, um, especially if you are just at the beginning of your journey, if you just have an idea, but you haven't fleshed things out yet, you haven't built anything yet, start with creating a business model canvas, which is a one-page equivalent of a business plan. A business plan being really just a written document that captures your vision in a structured, in an organized manner. And the traditional business plan, again, 20, 40, 60, however many pages, goes into really deep levels of who are the team members that I have that I'm working with. What's the product that I'm bringing to market? How big is the market opportunity? Um, a competitor analysis is usually part of that business plan. Then there's a section on the financial model, funding needs, where I'm going to spend the money, and the list goes on and on and on. And before you know it, you end up with a 40 or 60-page document, which then demonstrates to whoever your audience is that you have a viable business on your hands. Again, the focus here is to demonstrate financial viability. In other words, that your product or your service can actually make money. Now, if you're just developing a product, maybe an app as a hobby without ever having any intention of making money with this, then do you need a business plan? Probably not. But nevertheless, it's always good to write down what's in your head, because through the process of writing things down on paper, you crystallize your vision, which makes it so much easier to communicate to others. Uh, and that brings us to planning and presenting. Again, planning to focus on what exactly it is that you're building, why are you building it, how are you making money, where are you spending money, and then presenting it to either key executives that you're planning to bring onto your team. Maybe you want to hire a co-founder and you need to communicate to him or her what your vision is all about. And last but not least, certainly if you go for financing, venture capital or any other form of financing, they will usually expect for you to present to them a fully fledged out business plan that demonstrates exactly how much money the investor is going to get in return after a certain amount of time has passed. So that's your traditional business plan. And again, at Ernst Young, when one of those big companies, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals or Motorola, brought us in, I mean, we would spend 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks on site at the client offices with a team of 2 or 3 consultants writing a business plan that was anywhere between 40 and 80 pages in length, just the business plan. And then you would have another 100 pages worth of backup, source materials, research materials, all of the data that went into creating that 20 to 40 page business plan. Now, is this something that is realistic for an entrepreneur who just has an idea or maybe a very small team, somebody who's just getting started? Absolutely not. The business model canvas really is a document that's friendly to the startup founder. There's no way that somebody who is just coming out of the gate will find the time or the patience to sit down to create an 80-page document with 100 pages worth of appendix. As a founder, what you want to do is you want to build the team and you want to create your product and you bring your product to the marketplace. But the last thing you want to do is lock yourself away for 3 weeks and just write a document. So a traditional business plan is an absolute non-starter in a startup environment. So that's what the business model canvas really does. It's taking that big business plan and putting it onto a single page, which is very easy for an entrepreneur to create. You sit down for an hour, maybe 2, maybe you come back after a day, sit down for another hour, and that usually is enough to document your vision on this single piece of paper, which we're going into in just a couple of minutes. Now, the purpose of the business model canvas is exactly the same as the traditional business plan. You want it internally to clarify your vision, but you also need it to communicate your vision to external stakeholders. Now, whereas with a traditional 80-page business plan, you might go after venture capitalists who want to see that level of detail. Certainly, the business model canvas would not be appropriate or the appropriate tool to do that. But it's not supposed to, because when you're a startup founder, you're just coming out of the gate. If you're going after funding, it's going to be friends, family, it's going to be maybe an angel investor. And those individuals are usually open to receiving the condensed version, i.e. a single page business plan, rather than having to wade through a 100+ page binder. Why do we do it this way? I've already mentioned business model canvas, a single page business plan is easy. It's easy to start. You sit down anytime during the day for an hour and you can usually knock out an initial version, your first version of that business model canvas. Then as you go along and you learn about how your business performs over time, it's very easy to go back because you have your business plan on a single piece of paper. You can easily go in there and make changes in a very fast manner. Imagine making changes to a 100-page document with spreadsheets, financial model spreadsheets that have maybe 10, 15, 20 tabs at the bottom. It's a huge exercise, which again, a founder usually doesn't have the time or the patience for. So it's simple to start. It's very easy to adapt and to augment and to improve as you go along. And last but not least, obviously, there's clarity. Again, if you want to communicate your vision to somebody very quickly, maybe within a 1-hour meeting, you can do that with a single piece of paper, the business model canvas, but you cannot do it if your audience needs to familiarize themselves with a 100-page traditional business plan document. And just before we run or we go into the actual model, how do we start? I usually recommend the founders sit down and do this initially and for themselves, just to clarify in their own mind what the business is all is going to look like. then if you feel comfortable sharing your vision, and you would usually do that if you bring in a co-founder or senior executives, then you sit down with these individuals and communicate again using the business model canvas as the common ground, the common denominator. And one thing that I found very interesting and fun, actually, at previous startups that I was a co-founder in here in Santa Monica, when you have a small team, you're still in startup mode. Maybe you have a team of anywhere between 5 and 15 people. It's a really nice exercise to come together maybe every couple of weeks to sit down over a lunch meeting, for example, and throw up your single page onto a screen and have the team discuss where are we right now? Are we still focusing on the proper target market? Have our revenue sources changed? And make any changes as you go along. All right, so here we go. This is a blank, the blank structure of your business model canvas. And I'm not sure, it depends on your screen if you can tell, but in the center, do I have a pointer here? I don't know if I have a pointer. In the center is a green box, and then to the right of the green box are 4 boxes that are shaded in light blue. And to the left of the center green box, there are 4 boxes that are shaded in a light pink, I suppose. And what this denotes is your general structure for this business model canvas. And let's go again to the center box. In the middle of this thing sits your product or your service, which is denoted here by the label value propositions. And then to the right of that center box, you have everything that's outward facing, i.e. facing your customers. You are looking at your customer relationships. How do you want to develop those? There's a box for channels, meaning how do you reach your customers? Then you have your box for your customer segments that you've identified. And last but not least, at the bottom, there's the blue box labeled revenue streams, which is indicating, well, how are your customers paying you? And how are they actually going to, or what is it that they're paying for? We'll get into the details here in a minute. To the left of the value proposition box is everything that's more or less internally focused. If we're staying on the lower segment here, the cost structure obviously denotes your buckets, your payment buckets, right? So what do you have to pay for hosting, service fees, employee salaries, office space, and whatnot? We'll get into that again in a minute. Above that, we have the boxes that say key resources, which are your inputs that you need in order to produce your service or your product. And above that sits the box key activities, which are your core activities, some things you're going to do in-house, but other things you're probably not an expert in. And so you have to rely on key partners to perform those functions. Just as a quick example, it's unlikely that if you're running a startup, you will have a full-time attorney, lawyer in-house. So, but if you need any legal work, you would just rely on a partner that works for you on a freelance basis. So this is the general structure. Let's jump right into it and populate these boxes with some generic categories. Again, once we're done with this exercise, which I would call a theoretical walkthrough of the model, we'll actually jump into a real life example. But let's go through the theory first. Again, center box, green shading. What's the problem that my product addresses, and how am I going to do that, right? So the key takeaway here is to not just list your product or service by name, but to actually start thinking down to the next level of how is my product different from anybody else's out in the market. And I've listed a few differentiators here. There's several more, but maybe your product is bigger, smaller, prettier, more convenient, cheaper. Could be any of these things, could be a combination of these things. Again, the key is to point out how is it different. And just to give you an example, at Santa Monica New Tech, we have a lot of entrepreneurs who come to the group and tell us, oh, I have an idea for a dating app. My favorite example. So many people with ideas for dating apps. And so if you know me, my very first question to these individuals is, well, why does the world need another dating app? And I'm lucky to report that usually the entrepreneurs have a good answer. So um, they have thought down to that next level. They are aware that there's a bunch of dating apps already out there, big ones even, but they have come up with or they have found a different angle, something that is not represented in the marketplace right now. And this is exactly what you put into this first box. Moving right along, we're looking at your customer segments. Well, you have a product, maybe a dating app. Okay, fine. Who is this for? Again, at the highest level, somebody might tell you, okay, well, I have a dating app, and according to my research, about 50% of the entire population is not in a relationship. To which I would reply, okay, well, then in the United States, you're telling me that your customer, uh, your target market is for whatever 160 million individuals. How are you going to reach these people? Because guess what? If you create a website or if you create a mobile app, dating app, and you put it up into the onto an app store, nobody's going to find that, right? Which means you will have to somehow get to these people, educate them, and that usually costs money, which again, if you're a startup, you rarely have. So in order to narrow down and make the best use of whatever limited resources you have, the customer segments box right here captures exactly the individuals that you're going after. Mass market, sure, that's the high level of the funnel, right? But how can you narrow that down? Can you find a specific niche? Can you tailor your product or your service maybe just for the corporate sector? Um, how about the educational space or government? As soon as you have identified what niche you really can reach effectively, cost effectively, more than anything else, figure out, okay, well, then as far as the demographics are concerned, can we maybe limit our outreach to a particular geographic region? I always mention California or Southern California as a perfect proving ground for any type of business, right? If you launch a business successfully, even maybe just in the Los Angeles area, let's say dating app just for Los Angeles, you can have a solid business. You don't need to roll that out across the entire United States or even worldwide to be able to prove that, hey, you have come upon a differentiator in the dating app world that makes people willing to open their wallet and pay you for the service. So narrow down your customer segments, your demographics, maybe even down to the individual personas. What's a representative of your target market look like? What does he or she feel? What does he or she think? What do they do first thing they get up in the morning? What do they do last thing they before they go to sleep? Narrow it down as much as you can. It's going to make everything so much easier. What does it make easier? Well, it makes it easier to reach these individuals. Like I've said, if you're a startup, you're usually resource constrained. You certainly don't have a lot of money to put into paid ads or pay a public relations firm. So you have to think about, well, how do I reach these individuals? First of all, how do I reach the heads, right, the minds of your target customers? Because hey, you need to make these people aware that you're out there. You need to educate them as to why your dating app is better than anybody else's. But then you also have to facilitate the transfer of the product into the hands of your customers. So, okay, if you are an app developer, that's easy, right? You have the app stores, iOS, Android. You put your apps on there, fine. But if you're developing a physical product, now all of a sudden there are so many more options to get your product into the hands of your customers. You could start selling the product from your own website. You could open a retail shop. You could try to make it into Costco, Walmart, Target, any of the big box retailers, for which you would probably need to establish a relationship with a distributor. Lots of different ways and means to get your product across. Write them all down. Figure out what's most appropriate for your particular product. Okay, so you have a product, you've identified a target customer, you figured out how you're going to reach this customer and sell them something, right? What comes next? Well, customer relationships. What are we talking about here? Is this a one-time deal? Is this just a one-time transaction? Or are you planning to develop an ongoing relationship with your customer? And so, you know, customer support is expensive. This certainly depends on the type of revenue that you're going to generate from your target market. If you are generating enough revenue to provide dedicated support, then that would be perfect. Frequently, however, if you're just launching a product or a service, especially if it's a mobile app, and you're giving that away for free, maybe you think you're going to make some revenue from in-app purchases or advertising, but certainly you're giving away the base app. There's no revenue coming in. So are you going to be able to hire somebody to answer the phone and answer emails, provide dedicated support? No, of course not. So in those cases, you would start with self-service, maybe a forum-based support structure, even a simple FAQ page, which would probably the lowest form of customer support. Those avenues are available to you. And the third bullet here, it's complicated. Well, usually, or there's a lot of examples of apps out there that start out with just giving away the product and then base functionality essentially. And then you give your users an option to upgrade to a paid subscription in order to unlock additional functionality or something that generates revenue that would then allow you to offer a two-tiered support system, no support or self-service support for your free users, and a little bit more dedicated support, email, phone, whatever it might take for those individuals who actually pay. Paying, my favorite topic. This is the revenue box at the bottom, box number 5. How do you make money with this thing? I said earlier, if you just have a hobby, right, and you're doing this for fun, it might still be an interesting exercise for you and maybe a co-founder to complete this business model canvas. But especially if you are trying to build a growing concern, a growing operation, you're going to have to think about how you're going to make money with this thing, because there's going to be salaries, there's going to be hosting fees. Certainly you have to pay for yourself, especially if this becomes a full-time job for you. Different types of revenue models here. I just threw some of them out. There's fixed, where you charge a one-time fee per download, for example. There's the freemium model, which I just mentioned. The base product is free, and then you charge for additional tiers of product utility. There's a subscription model. You can charge based on the volume of product that's being used or volume of service that's being used. There's all kinds of different revenue models here. The main difference is, are they fixed or are they dynamic? And of course, the dynamic revenue models are, at least to me, I suppose, as a consultant, the more interesting ones. You're all familiar with what Amazon is doing. They're a prime example of the demand-based revenue model. When there's a product that's super hot, because maybe it was featured on TV or was mentioned in a blog, in an influential blog, or an influencer mentioned it somewhere, all of a sudden you see that product tick up in price almost in real time, right? And then after a few days, when there's no more demand, well, guess what? That product goes back down in price. Similar to what you would expect with a seasonal pricing model. Example, Valentine's Day. So that bouquet of roses costs you double on Valentine's Day than what it costs you one day prior and one day after. Figure out how to make money. Write it all down here. Doesn't mean that it has to work. It means that you identify potential sources of revenue, and then as you go forward with implementing your business, you tick off the boxes that work for you and you take out the boxes that do not work for you. All right, let's stay on the money track here. We're going over into the red shaded part of the business model canvas. How do you spend money? And again, just some examples of fixed and variable costs that are listed here. Salaries, rent, utilities, marketing expenses, you name it. Some of these things obviously don't apply to you, or maybe they don't apply to you during the early stages of your business. But as you go along, you come back to this document. Again, make it a living document. Don't fill it out once and then put it away on a shelf and never come back to it. But revisit this thing to crystallize and refine and fine-tune those things that are working for you. So, but when you just get started with a blank canvas, you throw everything into that cost structure box that you can think of that would apply to your business, to your product, to your project. Maybe at the early stages, you would call it a project more than anything else. Box number 7, key activities. And this is really your core competency. Who are you? If you are an app developer, then clearly your strength is in coding. You will probably not be an expert in business planning or fundraising or marketing. Figure out what is it that is required for your particular product, for your particular business. Write it down in the key activities box, but at the same time, keep in the back of your mind that maybe, just maybe, you will need a little bit of help in bringing your product to market. Now, I know how it is, right? If you're a founder, a startup entrepreneur, you're probably doing everything yourself or as much as you can. Still, there's probably some areas where you definitely have to rely on a key partner. And again, I'm bringing up legal because for me, you know, it's super critical that you don't get anything wrong when it comes to developing contracts and or applying for intellectual property patents. Maybe even contracts with regards to bringing on co-founders and key executives. Those things you absolutely want to get right. So you're probably not going to make or not going to be able to do those things in-house, meaning legal support, legal work is probably not going to be a key activity for any founder. And in the key resources box, very quickly, different types of resources that go into making your product, physical resources, you know, what is it for an app developer? You need a laptop, maybe you need some software that you have to pay for. As far as intellectual property or intellectual resources, you have your knowledge, obviously, you have your know-how, you have your education. Maybe there's some licenses that you will need. Say you want to use some popular music in your app, you probably have to get a license for that. Other than that, there's then, again, financial, legal, human resources. Write it all down, put it all into the box so that you get a complete picture of what eventually is going to be required to develop your product and bring it to market. And last but not least, who are some of the partners that you will have to work with? Suppliers, any distributors, especially if you work on a physical product, you have to work with third-party logistics companies that are shipping your product from the origin manufacturing plant to the actual distributor, to the individual retail locations. There are individual service providers. I said it before, if you're a developer, maybe you're not so good at marketing, maybe you're not so good at advertising, legal, again, collaborators, alliances, anybody that you can think of that you can bring into your organization on an outsourced basis, certainly not on a full-time basis, not as an employee, but as a partnership that would be required or very highly desirable to secure in order to generate that product, which is different and unique from everything else that's on the market. So this is the theory. And for us to look at a real life example, again, I said it earlier, we're going to use the Starshine mobile app that Dominique is developing. And this is an old version of the business model canvas that I'm going to use as an example. So, and there's no super secret stuff in here. That's all taken out and removed. But I thought it would be a perfect example to show something in this particular space, because Dominique told me that several of her audience members are developers or are individuals interested in augmented reality, extended reality, that sort of thing. And so rather than use one of my own examples, I figured we use Dominique's app. All right, let's get started. What do we have here? Dominique, she told me she's working on a mobile app. I said, that's great. There are 100 million mobile apps out there, so why do we need another mobile app? And she said, well, you know, it's somewhat different. It's about education and entertainment, but combined at the same time. And I told her, well, okay, well, then that narrows it down from, I don't know, there's 1.7 million apps in the iOS App Store right now. That maybe narrows it down from 1.7 million to 1 million. What else? She said, okay, well, but my app is specifically focusing on space exploration. So would that make a difference? I said, oh, okay, now it's getting very interesting because certainly space exploration is a very hot topic right now. I believe tomorrow um, we have the Crew Dragon coming back from the ISS. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow. I believe it's tomorrow. And then I said, okay, well, that narrows it down much more, but what else do you have? And she said, well, not only is it focusing on space exploration, but it's also using augmented reality. And my feedback immediately was, okay, perfect. So I don't know of any mobile apps in the App Store. True, I haven't really done extensive research, but I certainly am not aware of anybody doing this kind of work right now. So I think you might have something here that is actually very unique and very different from everything that's out there. Okay, so let's assume that this is a viable product, a great idea. Who is this for? And here are Dominique's post-it notes for her target market. She said, okay, well, I want to target gamers, which, all right, so there's millions of those out there, very big segment. How are you going to reach these? And then she said, okay, but gamers that are also space fanatics. And if we want to drill this down, maybe we can make this even attractive to students. And now all of a sudden the target market is much smaller, right? So these are potential end users, but there's a secondary opportunity, which is to go after corporations, specifically space and rocket companies, NASA, SpaceX, Rocket Lab. Uh, there's a very finite universe of companies in this space right now, which might be interested in the product that you're developing. How interested? Would they be willing to pay for this? We don't know yet. It's not quite clear, but certainly there's an opportunity here. So let's put it into the customer segments. And then last but not least, there's schools. And specifically within schools, there's the science department. And within the science departments, there would be classes that are focusing on space exploration, or maybe there's a segment of a class that focuses on this. So there's another opportunity to maybe partner with them, which would make these schools show up in the key partners box all the way on the left, or ideally have these schools become customers somehow. Customers to me usually means paying customers, but maybe there's other means of getting compensation. Schools are very tough to get revenue from. They're all cash strapped. We all know that. But there might be other opportunities to sign them up as actual customers. All right. So we have a product. We have a target segment. How are we going to reach these people? And here's Dominique's first thoughts on how to reach these segments. Branded website, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Then her app is going to be launched in the app stores, so that's also quite straightforward. Partner websites, I thought that was interesting, especially if you manage to sign up some space companies or some schools. Obviously, they can do a lot of marketing for you, right? So SpaceX, I don't know how many followers they have on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and whatnot. But if they like your product, they can promote your product to their followers. So that would be huge, fantastic channel if you can get access to it. And the last post-it notes on this particular slide is social media, which of course, again, you would establish profiles for your Starshine app on the various platforms. And if you have funding, you could put a little bit of money behind promoting that. As far as customer relationships is concerned, to be honest, because the app, at least initially, is going to be a free download, there cannot be any dedicated support, right? So customer support has to be self-service or the Discord community or any other platform where users can post questions and receive answers to their questions from other users. So it's completely self-service, self-help. That makes the most sense, especially during the early stages of this type of business. And we want to make it a business. So, well, in that case, there's got to be revenue. How are we going to generate revenue? Still to be determined. Certainly options and opportunities exist as far as in-app purchases are concerned. You could envision your main characters in the free app to purchase additional powers, customize their avatars, whatever it might be that you can generate revenue from. Then there's also the opportunity to create advertising, to run in-app advertisements. Now, the problem here is that if you don't have a large user base, and if you're just coming out of the gate, you will not have a large user base. Revenue generated from in-app advertising is going to be minimal, if any. But then I looked at the third revenue opportunity that she came up with, and I really like this one. So if you can read it, it says consulting gigs. Consulting gigs. And I thought about it. Oh, okay. That makes sense if this app gets onto the radar screen of a space company such as SpaceX, and they really like what Dominique is doing, maybe they will hire her to create additional apps, customize the current app, have her evangelize space technology and what they're doing at different schools or to different user bases. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunity here. And quite honest, if I look at the revenue streams right now, I think that third box, as far as consulting gigs are concerned, is the highest revenue or the biggest revenue opportunity that she has on here right now. Will it pan out? Who knows? But again, the exercise is to just get everything that's in your head out on paper. So here we go. Now let's look at cash out. Salaries. She's probably going to have to work on her own for now, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't have expenses, especially if it's a full-time gig and she doesn't have a paying job on the side. Then all of a sudden, it becomes much more important to be able to cover your rent, your utilities, your monthly living expenses. There's also going to be some fees that you'll have to pay for hardware, software, and hosting, minimal marketing expenses if there is funding, and if there's a need to run some paid ads. Certainly, this is going to be a cost bucket for her. App Store, I believe Apple takes what, 30% first year, 15% second year on a subscription basis. So there's some fees that come out of that revenue stream. Payment processing, probably not so much unless you are handling offsite transactions outside of the App Store. And let's see, we have office and utilities, also not applicable, especially if she continues working from home. And last but not least, travel. Well, we are so lucky. I keep saying it. Here in Southern California, we have easy access to SpaceX. Rocket Lab is here in Huntington Beach. So if she were to manage to get onto the radar screens of some of these companies, she can easily drive there. But is that going to be a big expense? No, it's not. But as soon as you look into attending trade shows or traveling cross country, then that gets very expensive very quick. So might not be a cost bucket for her in the near term, but I just put it on here anyways, because again, the purpose of the business model canvas is to get everything that's out, everything that's in your head out on paper, so you can communicate, you can revise it, you can use it for your internal plan. Next, key activities. All right, it's pretty straightforward for a game developer. The thing has to be designed, then it has to be coded. You will have to come up with some unique branding that communicates a consistent message to your target market. And then at the end of the day, there's sales and support, hopefully, again, or very likely, I should say, because it's going to be a free app, there's not going to be any dedicated support. Still, somebody will have to set up the FAQ pages and monitor Discord and whatnot. So there's certainly a little bit of activity involved here that she can do herself. She doesn't need specialized expertise for these individual core competencies because she is a developer. Now, as far as key resources, meaning key inputs into the programming is concerned, I don't know her background well enough to know whether she can design the game herself or if she needs some help with that. We all know that she's a brilliant developer, so certainly that post-it note is covered by her. Branding and marketing, she might have to look at securing the help from somebody there. Maybe initially this can be handled in-house, but funding, again, I don't know about her finances, but that's probably something that at some point will have to be addressed. And so the key partners then, the final box on this particular business model canvas include, like I said earlier, space and rocket companies, as well as schools or space education centers. Ideally, we would want to make them paying customers, but if that's not possible, let's sign them up for partnerships and use their vast communities of supporters and followers to promote our product, right? Other key partners might include an ad agency, um, marketing and public relations, and my favorite post-it, which is not on here, is legal support, because once you sign up, or once you go out and sign up paying customers, or develop partnerships, there's two ways of doing it. One would be to let them take the driving seat. So somebody at SpaceX would be presenting a legal document to her and encourage her to sign that. And maybe that's the way to go, especially if you're just starting out and you don't have any leverage. But eventually, and especially if you're bringing on co-founders and or getting into intellectual property protection, that sort of thing, and hopefully it will never come to disputes, you will need the help of a legal professional, in which case, again, you would not have that person on a salary in-house. You would go to them on an outsourced basis whenever the need arises. All right, so this is the completed business model canvas version 1.0 for the Starshine mobile app. And this brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'm going to open this up for questions.
Anyone has any questions regarding to the business canvas that JT just presented?
Yeah, I do actually. This is a great concept. First of all, was there a particular place that you recommend to get this business plan, business model canvas?
Oh, thanks for reminding me, Ralph. So let me talk quickly about the origin of this thing. So, of course, as you can imagine, this was developed by a consultant and entrepreneur in Switzerland, of all places. And I always forget his name. It's Alexander Osterwalder. And he published this thing in 2010, so 2010, which means it's fairly new. But because the simplicity just strikes a chord with entrepreneurs, it's become immensely popular. So for those who want to dig a little bit deeper, there are books on Amazon, which I can recommend. Business Model Generation is the name of the book, which is really the thing that started it all. Again, the name of the book is Business Model Generation. It's a handbook almost that takes you step by step through various examples. But if you don't want to buy the book and just get a little bit more background and maybe see some more examples, there's a ton of material on Google. There's presentations, there are PDFs. YouTube has an extremely well done course. It's a 1-hour course, I believe, on how to prepare one of these business model canvases. So a ton of material out there.
One other question, if I may. You address one issue which I think is really critical, and that is that all too often business plans are made to raise money. And once they've succeeded in raising money, they seem to go into the drawer and gather dust until needed again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have you actually, which is the equivalent of preparing for a trip from LA to San Francisco in the old days before smartphones, mapping, writing it out, or rather marking it out on a map, and then when you're about to leave, you toss the map out the window, which makes absolutely no sense.
Right. So you're absolutely right, Ralph. And I can give you actually real life examples for that from my consulting days. So first of all, the business plan is supposed to be a living document that once, again, the main purpose usually, especially in a Fortune 500 type of environment, is to secure funding, right? But once you've secured funding, it should be used, or it could be used as a roadmap for actually implementing what is being described in the business plan, but it's not. As far as using it for funding, I always cite the example of at Ernst Young, when we would be called in, it was usually by the CFO. And I always ask myself, well, why is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, hiring us to create the business plan? Why is it not the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer? Shouldn't it be him or her? Why is it the CFO? And the reason became clear very quickly, sitting in a presentation where the CFO was in a board meeting and requesting 20 or $25 million to launch a new initiative within the organization. It all started to make sense to me. The CFO is commissioning a business plan to go to the board and say, hey, look, I have an idea. Together with the CEO, we've developed this idea for, let's say, a new line of business, right? Or a new product. And I need 25 million for that. But don't take my word for it. It's going to be super successful because our friends at Ernst Young have created this business plan. Here it is, all 180 pages, 80 pages worth of business plan, 100 pages worth of backup. And if you're so inclined, take it home, read through it. Bottom line is, they've given me the AOK to request the 25 million or to release or request the approval for me to release 25 million to the CEO, which will then launch the initiative. So yes, primary objective is being funding. Then it gets put on the shelf. Hey, we have our money. Now we're off running. And unfortunately, all of that knowledge, all of that research, all of that learning that took place during the 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, however long it took to actually create that document, goes out the window.
So from the startup perspective, there would appear to be an opportunity to say, hey, what about a living business plan where you model the damn thing, but where from the get-go it is designed to be a central part of the operation. And of course, it can and should and must be updated periodically to reflect the realities. After all, it's full of assumptions.
Right.
Now, as you hit realities, wouldn't it be cool if you could say, this is what we thought, this is what reality is, now let's adjust it in real time so that we can learn from it and it has its full functionality.
Right. And the way I recommend doing it, there's 2 ways of doing it. Absolutely, it should be a living document. You can go back to your business model canvas and adjust the buckets, right? If you see that something has changed, maybe your in-app purchases as a revenue stream is not working out for you. Nobody's buying stuff. They just download the app, but they're not buying stuff. Well, 2 ways of going about it. You take off that revenue stream and you try to supplement it with something else. Or, and this is the way I always recommend doing it, is because look, we're talking about a single piece of paper. Create a second one, a version 2.0, and make all of the learnings reflect, have the learnings reflect on that second document. And as you go along, you develop a binder with version 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, all the way to the latest iteration of this. So that 6 months down the road, you can go back to that version 1.0 and say, oh my God, what was I thinking? You know, I had all these great ideas for making money but here we are 6 months later, and it's completely different reality. What an interesting journey it has been. Any other questions?
Any other?
Hi.
Gonzalo, I see. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, for the presentation. My question was related with value proposition. I know that there is something called value proposition canvas. We need to also address the value proposition canvas, or just the business model canvas will be enough?
So I'm not familiar with the value proposition canvas, but what I can assume here is, and this applies to all of the boxes on the business model canvas, there's a second layer to all of this. So when you talk about the value proposition in your product and how is it different, what are the different differentiators, or what makes it unique, you can drill down into each of these, and absolutely you should, right, as an exercise to really crystallize that vision into the most implementable product or service that you can come up with. But the same goes for the revenue stream and the cost buckets. This is high level. This is